I think we should kick off.
All right. For those who are going to miss the start, then we can just repeat the webinar. All right. So welcome everyone to our first official open to public presentation of Cyprus Environment Foundation. It is a great pleasure to be here co-hosting this presentation along with Jade from the Conservation Collective. I am the Executive Director of the Cyprus Environment Foundation, and along with Jade today, we will be presenting what is this new foundation about, what are our goals, our aims, and how we plan to be active in Cyprus in the years to come. As we mentioned at the beginning, we are recording the presentation, so it is going to be available for people to watch later on, and we will try to also upload it on our website. All right, so at the beginning, just to set the stage of what this new organization is about. Our vision as Cyprus Environment Foundation is to protect and enhance the natural beauty, the biodiversity and ecosystems of Cyprus. And we plan to do this, firstly, by raising funds from people and businesses that have strong connections to the island. And we use those funds to support the best local organizations that work in the field of environmental conservation. What we aim to do is that we want to support projects that can bring both economic and social renewal to the local communities of Cyprus, and ideally scaled up and replicated across the entire island or the Mediterranean region when applicable. By doing that, we at the same time want to be building a strong network across Cyprus so we can boost the work that these environmental champions are doing. So the Cyprus Environment Foundation is not an isolated organization, but is a member of a greater family, the Conservation Collective. And we have the honor today to have Jade with us, one of the founders of the Conservation Collective, to tell us a bit more about this organization. Jade?
Brilliant. Thank you, Sophia. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining today. We actually started talking about Cyprus, adding Cyprus as a new local environment foundation to the Conservation Collective, probably just under a year ago. We were talking with Ara, who's on this call, and Miria, and a couple of people with strong connections to Cyprus. And we hosted actually a webinar probably almost exactly a year ago, kind of really asking people, what do you think of starting an organization like this in Cyprus? And it was a much bigger group, engaging also the NGOs and people within government or within business to try to get a feel for what was going on there. And luckily, there was a kind of resounding supportive reaction that yes, there was a good need and position for an organization like this. So I'll briefly tell you a little bit about the Conservation Collective, which is a charity that I set up with Ben Goldsmith a couple of years ago. It is an organization, it's a network of local environment foundations based on a proven model of environmental grant giving. The first foundation was set up in Ibiza in 2008 by Ben and a group of friends who noticed the stark difference between the overdeveloped, ruined, in some cases, southern coastlines of the island, and then the natural, wild, beautiful north part of the island. And they got together and sort of scratched their heads and thought, well, what's being done to protect what's left and what's being done to restore what's been harmed in terms of biodiversity? And I think the answer at the time was relatively little. Flash forward over 10 years, and that organization is now bringing in over 400,000 euros a year and has done some amazing things around Posidonia protection, plastic-free business coalitions, working together with the municipality and other stakeholders to stop oil prospecting in the waters around there. So we soon realized that this was a model that worked, and we have since then launched, so Cyprus would be our 16th, and actually we have 2 more coming online quite soon, a number of these different foundations in different environments different parts of the world, different socio-economic contexts, and we now have a model that we think works pretty well. What we do here in the central charity, which we set up a few years ago, is that we incubate and launch the new foundations, and we also provide support to strengthen existing members. And that could be back office support, help with HR, shared learnings across the group, financial management support, communications, all the things that it takes to run a successful organization, but that can be pretty challenging if it's a one-man band working in a kind of region where there may not be all those different angles, and also on a relatively small budget, which we want to preserve mostly for giving through to projects. So my central team kind of fills in the gaps and supports the local directors like Sophia around the world. Next slide. Can you put, oh, here we go. So there we go. That's just a map showing where we're active. So as well as Cyprus and the Mediterranean, the first one I mentioned was in Ibiza, and we now also have them in Majorca and Menorca. We have 3 in Greece, in the Cyclades Islands, Ionian Islands, the Argolic Gulf, and also last year, most recently before Cyprus, we launched one in Tuscany in Italy. And we're currently working on new foundations for Malta, for Sicily, and for Croatia also in Europe. And a couple of years ago, we tried out this model in the UK. So we now have foundations in Devon and in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. We have a couple in the Indian Ocean and in Asia. There's the Pakistan Environment Trust. There's one in Sri Lanka, one in Kenya. And really, you know, wherever you look in the world, there are people with strong connections to places. And there are people working really hard to fight some of these issues. And what we're trying to do is put money into the hands of the people best placed to make these provisions. In the Caribbean, we have a foundation in St. Vincent the Grenadines and one in Barbados. And I've recently returned from St. Vincent the Grenadines with COVID. So apologies if I am a little bit hazy today, but this is just the kind of global map of where everyone is and what's coming down the pipe in terms of underdevelopment. Next slide. So there we go. So really there are kind of 2 huge issues, well, many issues, but there are 2 challenges within environmental philanthropy that we think we found a kind of winning formula in terms of how to address them. One is, how do you get people to give money towards the biggest issue of our time? And the other is, how do we get that money into the hands of the most effective delivery partners? So in terms of getting people to give money, we've worked out that by connecting problems to a place, people are far more likely to support, and particularly if they feel like those problems are tangible. I think we've all thought and felt terrified that combating tropical deforestation or fighting climate change is such a huge issue, and how can I really play a role in it? But when, you know, people where I live here in Hampshire talk about restoring the riverbanks or the chalk stream, it's tangible, and I can see that even with my relatively small personal amount of giving that I can give to the Hampshire Wildlife Trust, you can see it could make a difference. So you can move to the next slide, Sophia. So each of the people who give to our foundations either grew up on that particular island or on that place, or they have family there, or they have a business there. And they realize that, you know, if they want to keep coming to this place and keep being able to enjoy wonderful holidays with their children in the years to come, that actually things do need to change. And the ways that we're making that change is by setting up local regranting organizations, similar to the Cyprus Environment Foundation, so that we can get money, and often relatively small sums of money can make quite a big difference, but get that money into the hands of the best local NGOs who are working to protect the environment, restore nature, and safeguard against climate change. Next slide. There we go. So this is a kind of attempt to show you how our foundations work. In each place, we look for a group of donors to come together, you know, somewhere between 5 to 15 in the first couple of years. And we try to raise 100,000 euros a year for a minimum of 3 years. And from there on in, we kind of build that amount, let's say, aiming for 20% growth a year from corporate partnerships, donors on the island, both private and institutional. An example of the corporate partnerships that work quite well are hotels and restaurants putting €1 on the bill for the local environment and supporting a project that's close to that hotel in order to raise awareness to its customers and also try to support different projects that could relate to that business. In each place, we have a local presence. So we have a local executive director, like Sophia, who combines a grant making and fundraising role. And she will be out there looking for projects, which she's going to tell you more about today, to present to our steering committee. And that is really how the governance works. The steering committee is a group of 5 to 10, let's say, of the donors who meet quarterly to review the projects and to kind of brainstorm future fundraising opportunities, as well as feed into strategic ideas. We usually set up a local advisory board as well to provide that kind of ad hoc technical and scientific advice to aid the steering committee in making their decisions. Next one. There we go. I think I'm handing back over to the capable hands of Sophia.
Thank you very much, Jade, for the introduction. What Jade guided us through is how we will be operating here in Cyprus Environment Foundation. The foundation of our work starts with creating a local scoping report. And the scoping report is about recording the current environmental challenges, but also the opportunities. Who is active on the island, who is doing wonderful conservation work on the island, and potentially ideas of funded projects in the near future. So pretty much the scoping report that was conducted late summer 2021 consists the initial strategy of our foundation, but it will continue to evolve under timely environmental issues and under the guidance of what Jade referred to as our advisory council, what they advise us to do and what is the direction that they see is the most promising and the most needed. So the data that will follow is contained in the scoping report, and we would love to share this with anyone who would like more information, just a snapshot of why Cyprus, why there was a need at the first time to choose Cyprus. So Cyprus is a pretty special island. For those of us who know a little bit about the history of the island, it has a unique geological history with its terrain forming millions of years ago. And due to that, but as well as the unique climatic conditions that are in the area, we have high levels of endemicity. So we have species that are endemic to the area, that are unique to the area, can be found nowhere else in the world. Specifically, Cyprus hosts some of the most rare and threatened flora species in the Mediterranean. 7 out of 50 of those species are found on the island, but also it hosts some of the most important turtle nesting sites in the entire Mediterranean, with beaches located in the north of Cyprus, Ronas Beach and Alagadi. But also it is a very important bird migratory corridor, one of the most important in Europe and globally, with 100 to 150 million birds passing through Cyprus every autumn and spring migration. So Cyprus has also one of the highest protected areas in the entire Europe. About 28% of the territory is designated as nature protected area. Yet, people who work with the environment will tell you that we are in need of protecting our environment because we have inefficient monitoring and evaluation of our protected areas, because we lack data on marine, on freshwater, on our terrestrial species, but also it's the increasing pressures that are posing a threat on the health of all these habitats on the island. So we'll be sharing some of the data that is reported in the scoping report, which pretty much should be alarming to us because it showcases the need to do more environmental work. Unfortunately, we lead the way in illegal bird killing. For example, we are one of the 5 worst Mediterranean countries. Each year, 40 different songbird species are caught and killed through these non-selective trapping methods, resulting to 2.5 million birds every year. And not only birds are harmed through these methods, but also 150 different species. Overfishing is also affecting our marine biodiversity. We have a lot of fishing licenses for the size of our island, about 300 professional and about 5,000 amateur fishing licenses are in effect currently on the island. Then we have, again, some leading positions on waste management, where we have about 106 kilos of plastic waste produced per person, which is about 60% higher than the overall Mediterranean average. And overall, more than 600 kilos of waste produced per person, and only 18% of that is being recycled. As for land use, the road network in Cyprus is expanding very quickly, and about 88% in the last 20 years, which can be detrimental to biodiversity. We have pretty much expanded everywhere on the island, leaving only less than 5% as roadless areas. Also, because of this constant development, we are creating circumstances of bad air quality. And this is responsible for about 870 premature deaths every year. And for example, in Nicosia, people's life expectancy is shortened by 1 to 1.5 years because of these. Unfortunately, we have another lead on highest increase in pesticide sales in the last 10 years among 18 other EU member states. And as well with that, the way we are exploiting our water is not sustainable, and we have one of the highest water exploitation indexes among all Europe, signifying that we are a nation under severe water stress, leaving only 2% of our groundwater bodies in good quantitative condition. And lastly, as if all the anthropogenic factors were not enough, we also have the climate change, which is also anthropogenic source, but then not as immediate. And Cyprus is located at a hotspot for global climate change, and pretty much everything is changing. We have annual temperatures increasing by at least 1.5 degrees Celsius in the last 100 years. Heat wave days, they used to be 10 several years ago. We anticipated that in the next 80 years, we will have 210 heat wave days in the 365 days a year. Precipitation will be, it has been reduced up to 17% in the last 40 years. And something that should be alarming for food production, for our farmers, for everyone, that 70% of the island is under a high risk of desertification within the next 30 years. Not a long way to go. Let's see, can we change? All right, let's move on from the pessimistic data. Yeah, so this is these reasons anymore have propelled the creation of the Cyprus Environment Foundation. And as Ben nicely puts it, only 3% of global philanthropic funding is directed towards solving global environmental crisis. And the Conservation Collective and the entire family of foundations are working against this and are working to improve this. So how we plan to do work here in Cyprus? Through our foundation, as Jade mentioned before, we will be channeling funds from businesses and from philanthropists towards local grassroots nature regeneration projects. We want to be building eventually local coalitions that catalyze systemic change and building towards creating a strong network of experts on the island that will advise us and that will evolve the work of the Cyprus Environment Foundations and the collaborators of them. We would like to support projects that have a great impact. And of course, we will always be on the search for new sources of environmental funding. So we keep on fueling our environment, our local environmental champions. Of course, as part of businesses, through our projects, through our sponsors, they would be able to, we will be facilitating them in achieving net zero emissions through our projects. And what is unique about the Cyprus Environment Foundation is how we aim to be pooling funds all together and creating the leverage. So each donor can share their successes with the funds that the Cyprus Environment Foundation is utilizing to support local projects. In a nutshell, the way that we will be operating is we want to be agile, unbureaucratic, and basically getting stuff done. The structure is just as Jade described it a while ago. As myself, I will be coordinating the grants and fundraising, reporting on projects, getting in contact with local organizations as the executive director. The steering committee is a core in the administration of our foundation, which consists of our donors who want to be more actively engaged and can help with grant allocation, with strategy, with the growth of our foundation. And examples of our steering committee right now, we have the honor to have Ben, the co-founder, who is a co-founder also of our foundation, Jade, Peter Drushotis, Ara Kederian, and Miria Gitrianou. And we are, of course, always open for new steering committee members. As regarding our advisory council, which is an essential part of our administration, local experts who have in-depth knowledge on scientific or technical environmental issues like ecology, marine biology, regenerative agriculture. They're all part of this committee that is under construction right now, and it's looking really pretty promising. So the scoping report that we talked about earlier showcased 4 areas of interest for the Cyprus Environment Foundation. The first one is biodiversity conservation. The second one is regenerative land use. The third one is sustainable waste management, and of course, sustainable resource management, such as energy, water, air. The Cyprus Environment Foundation is looking to support any projects that work in these 4 areas of interest. It could be field work, like data accumulation, research-based. It could be engaging the local communities. It could be about campaigning or advocating about, let's say, a new legislative change that needs to be done locally, or it could be about networking. And of course, supporting our local groups with technical support if they need that. So just to give you some examples, these project ideas came up after interviewing local environmental organizations. So they are most probably very possible to be funded under the Cyprus Environment Foundation grant. And of course, we would like to also to invite Jade here to just jump in at any time. She has the experience of other local foundations across the world, and probably give us some example under each area of interest. So just to give some examples of what does biodiversity conservation project mean? It could mean that we could support establishing an all-island wetland monitoring scheme, which is much needed according to the needs expressed by local organizations. Or it could be support the creation of creating marine atlases that could help us monitor or advocate for marine protected areas. It could translate into marine turtle conservation efforts all across Cyprus, or supporting nearly extinct birds or any species of Cyprus. Alien invasive species is a great issue for Cyprus, and specifically in the marine area, population controlled, and we could be promoting in the means of this sustainable fishery practices through citizen science and through developing local supply chains so they increase the consumption of such species.
I can add one thing there, Sophia, in that we have run a successful program in the Cyclades in Greece on the alien invasive species with an NGO called ICI. We also know of a successful program on the Aegean coast of Turkey, and we're about to replicate something similar in the Ionian Islands. And I think what's nice about it, it has a very funny name, which I guess is translated from the Greek, which in English is pick the alien, eat the enemy before it eats you, or something like that. But it can be something that can raise awareness in quite a fun way. So we've had food trucks in Zakynthos during a festival, you know, taking lionfish and is it rabbitfish, the other one that's a problem? And they and working with chefs, it touches so many different levels of society. You can get kind of the public out taking leaflets and having samples of the food, but also working with restaurants and chefs, as well as with fishermen, kind of encouraging them to fish the alien species instead, which as a nice extra takes pressure off the kind of vulnerable overfished species. It's a really interesting kind of intervention point. I think sadly, due to warming waters and climate change, and I think potentially the Suez Canal is where a lot of them come through, we're not going to end the problem of invasive species this way, but I think it's a wonderful way to raise awareness and to engage a really wide group of people into the issues that are going on below the water.
That's great. That's great. We are already in contact with some of the conservation collective local foundations, and it is core in our operations to share best practices. So we will be, of course, stepping on success of other local foundations and building on that. So regarding regenerative land use that we talked about, some of the challenges before, it will be a way forward. For example, we had a detrimental effect of fires this past summer in the mountains of Larnaca. So there is a pressing need to restore and regenerate some of the recently fire-affected areas. And we can do that through educative seminars in collaboration with local organizations that helps locals move towards sustainable soil and water management, for example, in order to create sustainable reforestations, afforestations, and planting the destroyed orchards. Another example is awareness workshops that can help our farmers, but also our consumers prefer and be more regenerative farming and food consumption. That's something that's greatly needed on the island, and there's also a great interest to work towards that direction. Also, another interesting tendency we're gonna see more of this across the entire Europe. We're talking about farming carbon. So regenerative farming does really farm carbon. If our farmers can be paid, can be subsidized because they actually do that, that would be even more terrific. So we already have interest from local organizations to work towards creating an agricultural carbon sequestration model that will be based on regenerative farming practices. That means no burning of biomass, reducing tillage, applying mulching practices, and applying composting techniques. Do we have any examples, Jade, across our foundations?
For sure. Well, there's a couple of places now which are kind of working on the regenerative farming workshops and training for traditional farmers, and most importantly, also presenting them with the kind of commercials and the arguments around long term how this can reduce their kind of input costs for fertilizers and things, and also be something that drives a premium product that they can charge more for, so that it makes sense economically, not just for the environment. There's also a number of different examples where we have worked to promote local produce. So I don't know what the statistics are in Cyprus, but for example, in many of the Balearic Islands, it's kind of 99% of produce consumed in hotels and locally is imported. But there is, that in Ibiza, there were almond groves that had kind of fallen into disrepair, and the almond that in spring, the flowers on the almond trees are beautiful. So there was a project that they ran there working with the local farmers to put together a cooperative, just trying to remember how it worked, where they actually bought an almond crushing machine, this was it, and branded it Almonds brand kind of Ibiza. Because what was happening is farmers were sending the product off to the mainland and then re-importing it, and the cost didn't add up. But by developing that local produce, we've actually now managed to kind of restore whole swathes of trees and farmland and fields that were really not kind of being looked after, which helps in turn become an area that is, if not completely protected, at least de facto protected from development and being turned into a business park or a solar park.
Those are great. Thank you, Jade, for sharing that. Related also to farming practices and to the way we see waste. Waste doesn't have to be a problem. It just has to be managed correctly. So some examples of projects that we could support immediately is supporting sustainable marine waste management, for example. And that could be done through citizen science and through school education programs. And we have local organizations who have a great experience on this and are well equipped to jump right into a project like this. Of course, relating to the discussion before about farming, we could also support the transformation of green and garden waste into precious compost and initiating pilot schemes. For example, for a group of communities in Cyprus would enable to repeat such a good practice across the island and contribute as much as we can on being more responsible and being more sustainable in how we manage our waste, reducing our waste essentially. All right. Do we have anything related here, Jade? Should I move on to the next one, the last
I think I've got so many examples. I don't really know where to start on this one. But I think it's obviously an issue we see it across the board, and we're looking at tackling it through both kind of cleanups and engagement with fishermen and discarded fishing nets, but also through school education and also building coalitions of businesses like villa companies in the Ionian Islands or hotels and restaurants in Menorca to try to encourage people to put in a certification scheme where they get rid of a straw, or they might get 2 starfishes if they get rid of straws and cups, and kind of really funding someone to coordinate these programs means that they have greater likeliness of success.
Great. And for people who are interested, of course, you can jump in Conservation Collective's website, and you can just scroll through our local foundation's work, and brilliant examples of the work that Jade is mentioning today can be seen on each foundation's website. The last area of interest that we would love to support as Cyprus Environment Foundation is sustainable resource management. And by resources, we mean water, energy, and air. So we would love to, we already have a proposal that it would be great to explore the utilization of low value farming areas for the establishment of renewable energy parks, solar parks specifically. And that could be done on abandoned quarry areas of Cyprus, which are quite an issue for Cyprus and unexploited, instead of establishing such parks in nature protected areas or in fertile agricultural lands. Also, it could be that we will be supporting the creation of localized rainwater harvesting systems. As we talked about before, we are an island under water crisis. So moving towards the resilience of water management really makes sense. Also an example of another renewable energy project would be to create pilot small community and businesses wind turbine systems. And we could achieve that through school and community educative programs.
I mean, for the most part on the conservation collective sides, we are looking at sustainable kind of tackling, I guess, on the climate change side of things, more looking at the nature-based solutions. So seaweed farms or coral restoration or mangroves, ways to kind of lock in carbon. On the sustainable resources, there have been some interesting projects in the Mediterranean, actually, on an observatory level. So looking at both in Ibiza and Menorca and potentially in the Cyclades, a way to kind of do an overall study of what is the land use, what is the carrying capacity throughout the summer when the population goes from 300,000 to 3 million, what are the resulting effects on resources, whether it's water, waste, energy, and starting out of that to either come up with some recommendations for policy if we're working with local municipalities in those places, or to kind of look at ways where NGOs could intervene.
Excellent. All right. So if you found interesting what you heard tonight from us, we would invite you to send us an email at the email referred there, or give us a call. And you can get involved with the foundation in multiple ways. Donations, it could be a one-time donation, it could be, as Jade said, part of our steering committee and becoming a more regular donator sponsor of that for us. You could be suggesting and connecting us to potential donors or businesses who might be interested to get into our group of donors. But also there's the volunteering part that's coming up soon, as soon as we start getting projects out there and going. So our website will be describing all of these ways that you could collaborate with us. Sorry, the sound is a little bit...
Maybe.
So, yeah.
I was just going to say, maybe someone could go on mute in the background, because if we're going to get to questions stage afterwards,
yeah,
there's a bit of background noise.
All right, so our website is coming up soon, and we will be announcing that through our newsletter. So make sure that you send us an email if you're interested to updates, grants, updates on events or sponsorship opportunities. So we would love to hear from you and connect with you. Before we close, just a great thanks to our local photographers who donated their pictures for this presentation. Thank you very much for getting out there and getting these amazing pictures of Cyprus. And of course, thank you for your presence tonight. And we would like to also invite any questions that you might have for us.